Support Narrative's independent journalism at patreon.com/narrative and check out our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe and download.
The interview is the newsy part of the interview. We spoke about Ghislaine Maxwell and about Donald Trump's comment yesterday during a coronavirus press conference of all things. He spoke about Ghislaine Maxwell in the middle of all of that. Let's start with a comment from Donald Trump, and then afterwards, right away, we'll go into the interview and get Steve Hoffenberg's reaction to that.
Question, it's a little bit a different topic, but it's one that a lot of people are talking about. Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison. And so a lot of people want to know if she's going to turn in powerful people. And I know you've talked in the past about Prince Andrew, and you've criticized Bill Clinton's behavior. I'm wondering, do you feel that she's going to turn in powerful men? How do you see that working out?
I don't know. I haven't really been following it too much. I just wish her well, frankly. I've met her numerous times over the years, especially since I lived in Palm Beach, and I guess they lived in Palm Beach. But I wish her well.
He was taking aback and off guard, and he went into an emotional answer, and you could see his tone change to a concern and a worry. And I believe what he was concerned about is the risk assessment of the prison that Ghislaine Maxwell is in. The news cycle has been covering every day that she's got to be transferred into witness custody. Otherwise, she'll die in prison like Jeffrey Epstein died in prison. And that, I believe, was on his mind when he said he knew her, which he does. His first wife was her friend. Knew her dad really well, knew Jeffrey Epstein really well.
Just lived a few blocks away from both of them, right?
Donald knows very, very, very well who both Ghislaine and Jeffrey are and were, and all the different businesses that those two individuals have been involved in.
This was a grand performance yesterday of trapping himself, where he's trying to back it down today, and he can't.
He can't.
It's impossible to back it down. So this is a problem. This is a serious problem for Donald Trump.
I want to go back to what you were saying there, because you said that he was concerned about where she was staying, about the prison, which is the Brooklyn prison, and about her. Why would he be so concerned about where she's staying?
Because the risk assessment on her dying in prison could inflame this country if this happens. And it's reckless, based on her Bureau of Prisons risk assessment, to hold her in the prison she's being held in this moment. She belongs in a high-profile witness housing custody, like the mafia heads that they tried to convert to cooperation. She doesn't belong in that Brooklyn prison or the Manhattan prison where Epstein died. This is incorrect, because the risk assessment that's drafted by the Federal Bureau of Prisons prohibits her custody in that Brooklyn prison. There's no way to safeguard Ghislaine Maxwell by the staff in the Brooklyn prison. It is impossible.
I thought they've added a lot of new security around her. But again, we've seen that that's really, we don't know who we're dealing with in terms of the Epstein murder or suicide, but it's certainly, they were able to penetrate even a very, very high security prison, and he was in a high security part of that high security prison. So sure, she's at risk, but they have, I believe, added even more security around her, haven't they?
But their own policy requires her, the Federal Bureau of Prisons policy requires Ghislaine Maxwell to be in a witness housing, not to be in that kind of prison.
The crimes that she's being charged with do match where she is.
But I'm an eyewitness to the BOP, Federal Bureau of Prisons, risk assessment, writings, and policy. I dealt with that for years with my custody. And I can tell you that she doesn't belong under the Bureau of Prisons policy in that location right now. So you can charge her with 1,000 crimes. That doesn't change who she is.
Why is President Trump suddenly so concerned about where Ghislaine is staying? I mean, is he worried about her safety because he's worried about her safety, or is he worried about, he's not worried about her safety?
He's not worried about her safety. He's worried about her talking and explaining.
Okay, so you're saying it that way, Steve. That's right.
No, well, I want to distinguish and be concise. President Trump is petrified of what Ghislaine Maxwell will say about him.
I mean, that's clearly the case. That's clearly what's going on.
And his first wife. And Deutsche Bank, absolutely. Deutsche Bank had a very deep relation. Deutsche Bank had a very deep relationship before President Trump joined Deutsche Bank with Jeffrey Epstein in the same category of private banking.
And earlier, right, with his consulting firm, it was Deutsche Bank that was ultimately offering, that did his platform for the consulting firm. It may not have been his own bankers, but his consultancy worked with Deutsche Bank.
Deutsche Bank could be a major issue that Ghislaine Maxwell could elaborate on that might become very damaging to President Trump. Very damaging.
One would think so, because we saw a federal judge this week. The son of a federal judge was killed. Some people suspect it was related to the Deutsche Bank.
This could actually be a madman. They're tying him to a murder out here in California, or it could be something more orchestrated.
There is a lot we have to learn about what this man did, for sure. But I do think it's safe to at least, the stuff we do know about him, that he worked for this company called Kroll. They were investigating Deutsche Bank. They were the ones that were investigating Deutsche Bank. On top of that, they have a lot of, interesting connections to Russia. Make of that what you will. And he was a very elaborate hit.
If you want to talk about assassins and mob hits and orchestrated stuff, I study a lot of that. And what you do see in the more scandalous ones and the more sort of like confusing ones is that you have a crazy person involved. There's a bit of insanity going on, a huge instability. And so the question remains, in terms of organized crime, and in this world where, Deutsche Bank is this massive money laundering operation for organized crime, you have to look underneath that and sort of say, is this one of those sort of unstable individuals that gets used and weaponized, or is this just a crazy guy? Is he just crazy on his own?
We're talking about Ghislaine Maxwell, Deutsche Bank, and President Trump's linkage to the three parties. We're not off the track with what happened in the news cycle. We're focusing on President Donald Trump's deep involvement with Deutsche Bank, Ghislaine Maxwell's deep involvement with Deutsche Bank through Jeffrey Epstein and through her father, Robert Maxwell, and Jeffrey Epstein's deep involvement with President Trump, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Deutsche Bank. That's what we're focusing on, and that could be incredibly shocking to America for the coming election.
And so when he wishes her well, he's not wishing her well. He's not wishing her well.
He's dangling.
or he's dangling a pardon. I mean, that really is the other possibility. Do you think that he might be dangling a pardon in front of her? Do you think that that's what's going on?
This is a shocking statement made by President Donald Trump. Shocking. And it's got many legs that are not normal, very far from normal, because that language is never used by him except with Paul Manafort Michael Flynn and Roger Stone.
It's true. He doesn't wish anyone well, ever, except unless they're criminally co-conspirators of his.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen him do that before.
You know the guy.
Not with a woman.
Well, he didn't do it. He didn't do it with Stormy Daniels,
Right.
and with the alleged rapes. He didn't do that. He didn't wish anybody well. He didn't wish the victims well.
In the middle of a coronavirus press conference where he didn't wish any of the people who were sick from coronavirus or had lost family from coronavirus well.
No.
The only person who wishes well in the entire press conference was Ghislaine Maxwell.
It was wrong. It was wrong. He should not have done that. And he's being criticized for it. It was shockingly wrong.
This is why we speak with Steve. This is why we want to continue to stay on this conversation. This is about the money, everybody. This is about money. So that's where the crimes are. I know there's all this horror that is associated with Ghislaine Maxwell, that she's being accused of, that she's been charged with. And it is horrible, horrible crimes. So just unthinkable. The focus to understanding those crimes and understanding who's really involved and why is the money. You have to stay on the money.
Not only do you have to stay on the money, the man that we're talking to here knows a lot about where the money is. And where that money came from. So Steve Hoffenberg is not just an eyewitness to events that happened with Donald Trump and with Jeffrey Epstein, but he's an eyewitness to a crime that was committed by Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, let's look at the Southern District of New York's case and the great job the FBI did and what we see. In my opinion, Darren Indyke, who's in charge of all of this fortune of Jeffrey Epstein's illegal gains, I believe Darren Indyke could be, in my opinion, cooperating right now about this vast amount of money.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
Oh, yeah, because there's no way in justice, and LB can tell the public that.
I can.
Darren Indyke has been charged with manipulating a vast fortune of Jeffrey Epstein's as a co-conspirator in courtrooms in the Virgin Islands. I, in my opinion, would say he's cooperating right now with some authorities or regulatory environment and explaining in detail the illegal criminality in this vast fortune of money, billions of dollars, that we're touching upon today.
Well, I think
yes, you're going to see a laundromat. Yes, there's more. There's more.
Okay.
I believe Eva Anderson Dubin, her husband, is deeply involved in the Jeffrey Epstein monetary affairs. And you never know, in my opinion, he could be considered an opportunity to cooperate and explain the criminality in this billions of dollars of Jeffrey Epstein monies. This is a very serious, I think Maxwell is the last link.
Is the last person in. We've been thinking she might be one of the first, and you're saying she's the last one.
No. Darren Indyke can be a great cooperator. Ghislaine Maxwell can be a great cooperator. Dubin can be a great cooperator. And President Donald Trump would be substantially damaged in the mix.
Correct.
And
because what we think we know about the laundromat involves him, and it involves some of his former...
His casinos.
His casinos, but also some of his other, I don't want to call it financial institutions that have helped him, which include Deutsche Bank. So, that's the Deutsche Bank laundromat is basically a part of Donald Trump's world.
Oh, he has assets this moment, and has substantial debt to Deutsche Bank this moment that's going to come due in the next years. Ghislaine could be the wrecking device for this election for Donald Trump.
I'm going to say it's refreshing, I guess, to hear him focus on the money so forcefully, because I've now heard him talk a bunch on these interviews, and he's sort of, I'm talking about Steve now, and his tone of voice is usually the same, but there was almost a sense of urgency in his voice in this particular interview that I've not heard before, where he's talking about the Deutsche Bank connections and basically imploring everybody to focus on the money. You know, his talking about, first of all, equating her in the prison with a mob figure, which she de facto is, and focusing on the relationship between Deutsche Bank and Trump and Maxwell and Epstein is important. And I think that's the key. That's the critical key to all of this stuff. And LB, what you were saying at the end of the interview before it got cut off was, as horrible as all this stuff is, it detracts us from the thing that's going to take him down, ultimately. People love to, even my kids texted me that bogus debunked list of the teenagers that Trump had supposedly raped. And I'm like, that's not, I don't think that's true. You know, focus on the other stuff. We have to focus on the stuff that we can prove that's actionable. And you know, the thing about the money is you could trace it. Yeah. There's receipts, man.
You can trace it. There's receipts. And again, it's not about saying one crime is worse than another or more important than another or minimizing anybody's pain or any level of criminality. I mean, there is nothing worse than what these people did. I mean,
it's awful.
They destroyed people's lives, destroyed them.
You know, they would try to cover their tracks. They needed a blackmail scheme to hide all this other stuff they were doing, the laundromat and the arms trading and all of that. This was their way to ensure other people were going to stay quiet. Well, and so that's why the underlying crimes are so much more relevant in terms of figuring out exactly what their main goal was.
Here's the way to think of it. And it's going to rock people, but this is how you can get out of your own emotion of it. You're just that reaction, right? And because you should feel the cruelty in what I'm about to say is even worse, okay? Because it's dehumanized. These were dehumanizing individuals. They dehumanized others. The rapes and the molestations were a strategic tactic. That's who they are. That's who those people are.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's on us just so that we can stay present to this information and survive it, because it's like you know, waves of this horror show washing over us regularly. And this is a big part of it, and trying to wrap our minds around, and then people get in and weaponize, you know, the information and do their crazy conspiracies that have nothing to do with reality. And we just need to be as sort of calm and compartmentalized as we can be about going after the thing underneath all of this, going after the financial crimes, going after the money, going after the arms dealing, because that was what was so important to them, that they did this to all these girls.
Maria Farmer, who is one of the first victims, in fact, the first, I think, to report a rape to the Palm Beach police, is back in hospital today, suffering from, you know, she's been fighting cancer for a long time, and, you know, is having a tough time right now. And she's back in the hospital, and she does blame you know, she calls them the evil elites, and maybe that's what we can call them, but that's certainly in her mind who she blames, for not only what they did to her criminally and sexually and all those things, but what that's happened to her body today, and that the cancer that she's fighting, she attributes to them. You know, she believes that that's part of of what they brought to her, the toxicity they brought to her. So we're living through a real life tragedy as well. And we wish Maria all the best. And I know that she's going to pull through this, because she's done this before. She's pulled through before, and we're worried about her, but also hopeful. And we know her strength because she's been through so much. But it reminds you,
and she deserves some of that money, for God's sakes.
Oh God. Yeah, I mean, she can't even afford a cancer treatment. It's become this billionaire guy
so evil
takes advantage of this girl who's a art painter, an art student at the New York Art Academy, I think is the name. And she gets taken advantage of first for her art and her
artist. Gorgeous, yeah.
And then becomes his employee, but not really his employee, sort of his sex slave. And you've got that's a tortured past to live with for a long time. And I don't blame her for attributing that cancer to them, because I think there is a level of toxicity when you get that kind of trauma in your body that, I don't know, maybe you don't get out of it that easily.
Can I want to talk about two words that you each said. I think evil elites is one phrase, and compartmentalization is another phrase. We're asking people watching this to try to compartmentalize and take the horrible thoughts and place them to the side so that they can take in and process the information. But this is what these people do. They have to do it psychologically to survive. If you watch the Epstein doc, one of the interesting things about it was listening to Dershowitz talk about what he does for a living. And he's talking about his career as not only a criminal defense attorney and one of the foremost ones, but somebody that finds people that we all pretty much know are both guilty and horrible, and he's the one that swoops in to defend them. And he said in the doc, and I'm going to paraphrase here, as the attorney for them, I just hone in on what can help them and what can win the case, and I cast everything else out of my mind. And I feel like these people, Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell and her father, Trump and his family, or at least his kids, they have this tendency, I think, and the mobs do this too. They put a wall around their families and their associates, and everyone outside that wall can go fuck themselves. That's basically the attitude.
It's social. It's sociopathy, and
it's almost like a eugenics kind of thing in a sense, not a racial eugenics, but in a, we are the elite, we are the chosen, and you people are peasants. It's Orson Welles in The Third Man on top of the in that great scene on top of the Ferris wheel, looking down and saying, come on, look at all those specks down there. If I offered you $10,000 for each speck, would you really care? Or would you take the money? That's what these people are. And they're greedy, and there's no bottom to it, and there's no amount of money that will ever satisfy them, and no amount of power that will ever satisfy them.
Well, they only exist because they do view us as being lesser. They have this power structure that their survival depends on us being viewed as lesser beings, and so
they're parasites also.
Exactly that.
Right, because they make their money off of exploiting.
Yes,
us.
Exactly.
It's not disconnected. They profit off of human misery. They profit off of addiction for the drug trafficking. They profit off of rape for the sex trafficking, especially they profit off of near
the money laundering, the crashes.
They profit off of that. They profit off of blood diamond mining. They profit off of wars. They profit off of our pain.
They steal our money.
And they steal our money. I know a lot of people were upset when they heard Steve use the phrase law and order. Respecting Steve and what he has to bring to the table in terms of his knowledge and his perspective also means having brutally honest conversations with him. And so nobody holds anything back in this group, clearly. We're just not those people that don't just like,
no,
but
not that crowd.
But we're not that crowd. But it's also important to really to understand somebody and know where they've made a mistake and let them acknowledge what the mistake is around all that.
He genuinely misspoke. I think he didn't mean to say law and order. He meant to say something else.
Steve is in a he's in a different realm of his daily life, his experiences, and also what he's fighting right now, and what
he's focused on the victims. That's his only thing that he's focused on, and he doesn't get into politics around those victims because that would disrupt what he's doing. That does not mean that there are not people trying to use the story in whatever way they're trying to use it to weaponize it. But he's still doing what he's doing, which is trying to get the money back for the victims. And, it's a tricky territory for all of us. We're all sitting here playing with a very highly weaponizable narrative. And that's why we keep coming back to the money. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about the victims and the sex crimes, because as interesting and titillating as that could be, it isn't where the focus needs to be. The focus needs to be on the money, because that's always been the goal. And that's where the crime is.
Right.
And so,
frankly, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's what they're weaponizing the sexuality around it, so that we can't focus on the money. So the more we stay locked into that idea of we're focusing on just the money and on the actual criminal activity, because that's what we can get them on. There's criminal activity, the human trafficking, but 25 years ago, some of it's gonna be hard to enforce.
Everybody here is very upset about the very real threat that we're facing with another Trump term. Okay, so I'm not going to pretend it isn't my sole focus, right, to make sure that we bring an end to this monstrosity that's going on. I don't want to lose that's why we're here. So we're passionate about that, but it's not like a take down Trump at any, because we know who he is. So we're just trying to expose, if we can just keep exposing who this guy is, not as this horrible human being of racist, sexist, right? But as he's a fucking criminal, right? He's a criminal. He belongs in jail. And let's get to his crimes. And I think people need to prepare themselves. There may not be a demonstrable, in terms of a living witness or a tape, or even Ghislaine or anybody, offering up Donald Trump as one of these abusers. He might not be in that might not come out. There is no doubt he's in the financial crimes.
I think one of the things that Maria is concerned about right now as she's in hospital is that she is feeling very personally attacked by Alan Dershowitz. There's got to be a time. You hope that there's a time for people like Alan Dershowitz to have a conscience and a soul or something, that he can stop attacking someone who's in hospital right now for a little bit and let her get healthy. Fight her when she's healthy. This is not the right time to be attacking a victim of a sexual crime who shouldn't even be identified when you really think about it, and who's instead sitting in hospital, and he's doing, what any lawyer would tell you that you shouldn't do, and attacking her continuously. And the same thing's happening from the New York Academy. There's got to be some consequence and shaming for this, because this is not right. This has gotten to a point where they're re-victimizing victims again, and they're doing it in real time, and it needs to stop.
Yeah.
So back to the money, it is all about the money, and that's how we win the elections. In terms of what Steve does go on to talk about, is he talks about Darren Indyke and Ghislaine Maxwell. He's the executive of the state and Epstein's former lawyer. He already might have cooperated or started cooperating. He believes that cooperation has already begun, which is fascinating on its own, because it certainly lends a little drama. And it means that Ghislaine is now not the first person in line for cooperation, but maybe one of the last people in line for cooperation. And you were comparing it to rolling up a mob organization.
That's right. Okay, so how you take down an organized crime syndicate using the law, right, is you start with the little fish, use a little fish to flip the middle fish, you get the middle fish, you use the middle fish to flip the big fish, you use the big fish to flip the boss, to the shark, right? Whoever's at the top of the totem pole. Now, I have issues with that in and of itself. I think we have to reevaluate our entire process of going after organized crime. I do, because it's clearly not working. This guy's president didn't work. Kind of failed because the system got used against itself, and so a lot of stuff has to be rectified in that and rethought. Creative thinking. But here's the result: if she's the last one in, if she really is the last one in, that means she's caught. You don't go for the boss until it's all rolled up. There's nowhere to go.
Right.
The boss can't go anywhere. He could say, I'm not cooperating, I'm not talking, blah, plead the fifth, right? Okay, doesn't matter. We got you. We got you on paper. We got you with eyewitnesses. We have all this testimony. Bye-bye. You could have made it easier on yourself, but you're not going to. So it will now be even worse for you. It doesn't matter. That by the time they get to the boss, they don't need the boss. There's no one above.
Right. So they really have gotten to. So at this point, she's nice to have.
She was running the show.
But there is someone they do want. They do want Donald Trump, and I think they'd get Donald Trump through Ghislaine.
I don't know. I think they want. I don't know that they want Donald Trump. We have to see. It depends on how many financial documents they have their hands on. Is he going to be exposed? Yeah, but there might even be a whole hell of a lot of other people in there too. So I think what they want is the financial syndicate. I think they want the financial
Deutsche
syndicate.
Bank. We know that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell all coexist in that Deutsche Bank private wealth ecosystem. We know that they exist within the real world ecosystem that they were inhabiting together, and we know that they were involved in crimes potential crimes. So there's a lot going on there that makes you think that you're certainly over a target, that you're not far off from potentially proving that the president is involved in something like that. And my money would be that he is somehow involved in it, because just all the indications are that he is. I mean, how else did he get that loan from Deutsche Bank? It makes no sense that he got that loan from Deutsche Bank. And that bank, that section of the bank, is a giant laundromat as far as we can tell.
Well,
that's the reporting on it. Yeah.
We need to keep, I think, reiterating about the Deutsche stuff, that the bank, got its roots and came to prominence by servicing the Nazis, at the time of leading up to the Second World War, and was taken over by American kind of mavericks in the 90s aughts. And in the last 12 years has paid $11 billion in fines, billion with a B, which, as my boss would say, that's real money.
Fines it's real money, but fines are always a small portion of the overall.
And just last week, they paid $175 million just for the Jeffrey Epstein fine.
That was the Epstein, but they paid a huge fine for their role in the 2008 crash. They paid a fine for manipulating the LIBOR rate. They paid a fine for dealing with governments and foreign entities on the U.S. sanctions list. They paid a fine for the Epstein stuff. I think there's something else going on there too that I'm forgetting, but it's just a lot of money. It's a lot of fines. And why are you going to keep doing that? Why are you going to continue to have that business practice unless the money you're making from these seedy clients is so great that it just doesn't make any difference?
Well, can't keep doing it. I mean, it's illegal at some point. I mean, at some point they're involved in so much illegality, and they're the laundering out of Danske Bank, and that was just outrageous amounts of money.
It needs to be taken more seriously by other countries too, because from what I understand, the UK does not do a particularly good job of prosecuting money laundering.
No,
they fine, but any kind of money laundering that happens there, they just give it to us to do. And
it's hard for them. They love soccer. They love their soccer.
Someone's got to buy the mirror.
They'd rather have their soccer than get the Russian mob out of their frickin'.
It's a significant investment there that's going on.
Yeah.
So the bank itself, it seems to be the nexus of a lot of shady dealings, as we've seen, and as Steve Hoffenberg just spoke about, and the documents from Deutsche Bank, the Trump documents, are eventually going to make their way to Cyrus Vance, the DA of Manhattan. And we're going to take a look at these things. And, why did Trump get that loan? As you said, Zeb, why did Deutsche issue that loan? And the answer is they wouldn't issue the loan unless it was backed by someone else.
Who backed it?
Could be Epstein, could be the Russians. Who knows? We'll find out.
It could be. It might be Epstein. I mean, there's a likelihood that it could be Epstein, that he could be in there, and it certainly could be the Russians. But Epstein's if you're listing the top few people who might be involved in that, it would be
crazy.
It would be Jeffrey Epstein. Would be up there, which is why he wishes Ghislaine well, and that he doesn't wish anybody else well.
That's why he wishes her well.
Support Narrative's independent journalism at patreon.com/narrative. And check out our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe and download.